Debris boys and gear up girls, we have the patch notes for tonight's Jeff Marvel Rivals Collab Anniversary Part 1 update. The maintenance is going to be from 4 p.m. Pacific to midnight Pacific, which is the usual downtime maintenance, which means it's going to end at 3 a.m. on Wednesday, which is tomorrow morning, in the early hours of the morning, or whatever, late at night, whatever you want to call it. And I'll be live here on YouTube to dive into the update. There's not a lot, it's a bit of a kiddie pool of an update, but I'll be there nonetheless at 3 a.m. so keep it locked on YouTube if you want to see all of that stuff. What we're getting, let's take a look. So we're getting Jeff the Land Shark. He's going to be a premium character who will be available for free through the 11-year anniversary Eve event. So there will be a quest shop that opens up. I don't know if it's going to open up right away when the update comes out or a few days later. But there will be a way to get Jeff for free. Otherwise, you could get him through the bio subscription, and presumably you could also pull him potentially through the hero tickets and stuff like that, all that kind of stuff. He's a blast superhero creature male, which is pretty nice because we don't have a lot of creatures, so it's good to develop that ally type. He has agility and healing abilities, so it's a bit more useful for world boss stage requirements. His leadership is not anything special; it's the same as Venom's. His passives, however, are quite strong. So he has a passive for himself, which gives him super armor, all defense, 30% damage reduction, which is just okay. But then he has two support passives for superhero allies. One is a cleanse, so he can now cleanse all superhero allies, which is obviously pretty huge for any kind of PvP content and not too bad for PvE content. And then he has another passive for all superhero allies, which gives them a 45% increased damage to heroes, 40% damage reduction from villains, damage increase to villains, damage reduction from villains, and then ignoring non-boss enemy damage decrease by 10%. So very PvP oriented, but again, still useful for PvE. 45 and 40 are pretty high percentages, along with the damage decrease. So yeah, very, very nice. Probably going to be straight up a better cleanse than, let's say, Invisible Woman. Potentially not as good as Wasp or Strife, just because Strife has ostensibly deals more damage, and then Wasp has the HP. But he could be better than Wasp potentially. Depends on how much damage he does. He could be better than Wasp. He may be better than Strife, which would basically make him the de facto best cleanse for heroes. So that's pretty interesting. He only has 4 skills, however. That's kind of the downside of Jeff. He only has 4 skills. He doesn't have any iframe ignore, any penetration, any counterattack skill, this kind of stuff. So he is lacking that. He does have some really cute animations. That's to talk about in game. His HP heal is only 10%, but it does apply to all allies on Joyful Splash, and it does refresh. So this is kind of misleading. It's actually a lot higher than 10%. It's probably 30 to 40%. And the fact that it's all allies means that he can heal as, a striker potentially in a way, or he can heal in a 3v3 scenario like TBA, AC, or other world battle. So absolutely huge on his 3rd skill. It also gives him a frenzy buff, but the fact that it heals allies is nuts, right? Absolutely nuts. He doesn't have heals on his other skills for himself, so he does have to make it work from just Joyful Splash, but it's a pretty large AoE, so this is really nice. This is also the highest healing we've ever seen on a skill that applies to all allies, so this is pretty huge. Yeah, this is pretty damn huge. He has a barrier on his 2nd skill, and then he has a damage proc and invincibility on his 4th skill, and then he does have the kind of swallowing skill animation as well. I believe on his ult. But yeah, Jeff should be pretty interesting. Only having 4 skills is one thing, but he does have a lot of effects, and he does have a lot of ways as a support to influence the tide of battle. So yeah, it could be extremely powerful there, Jeff. Then we have the 2 new uniforms that we're getting for now. We have Captain America and Venom. Keep in mind that Luna and Moon Knight are coming in 2 weeks, so that's why they're not here. That's why they're not part of this patch note. Captain America here gets the 40% attack, the 30% decreased chain hit damage received on his uniform effect. This is pretty huge because they're doubling the decreased chain hit damage received from 15 to 30%. Now he is losing the zombie tag, which means he is losing the ability to get the berserk, which is the 7 seconds of immortality before dying. that weapon hex provides, but they're trying to beef him up in the meantime. The other stats are the same, the 40% attack and the chance to trigger immunity, but 30% decreased chain hit damage received is like walking around with part of Agent Venom's support buff on all the time. It's not bad. It's really not bad. He's got the VPAD alt, which is the same, but it's still a good skill. He's got the same leadership. He's got the same passive. They just tweaked the numbers slightly. So the defense is the same. The skill damage, bonus damage is the same, but then they bumped up his damage reduction, decreased basic damage received from 40 to 45%. So again, just trying to make him a little bit tankier here. And then he still has the cleanse. As far as his skills go, we'll have to see how they play in game. But they did give him the counterattack, or they give him the iframe ignore skill without the counterattack, which is nice, which means it just always gives you the same consistent number of hits, and it still has incapacitation, and it still has penetration, a 40% chance to penetrate, in fact, with immunity, and then the accumulation. And the accumulation is still 20% of damage when attacking. And then it is a 1% increase of each damage accumulated. So that is all the same. They also reduced the cooldown from 11 seconds to 10 seconds, so he can pop off his iframe ignore skill every 5 seconds. So could be pretty potent depending on how much damage it does. What's missing from this skill is obviously a heal and maybe a cleanse. He does have a cleanse on his passive, so he doesn't really need the debuff cleanse. But yeah, what Liberty Rush is really missing to make him even more consistent is a heal. But as we've seen, most of the time, only native tier 3 characters and some native tier 2s are getting, all of those abilities on one iframe ignore skill with a short cooldown. He does still have the 35% heal on his third skill with a frenzy buff, so that's nice. And then he has immunity there instead of invincibility. His fourth skill, they moved the frenzy buff away, so it's just a damage skill. And then his fifth skill has the invincibility with a different frenzy buff and then some other effects there. And they just tweaked his cooldowns a little bit to make them a little bit shorter in most cases. And then I think one of the skills, they made it a little bit longer at 14 seconds. So Cap kind of seems the same with just some tweaks to his defenses. But again, we'll have to see from the skills how much better they are. If he hits a lot harder, then he could be more of a threat for PvP despite not having immortality or revive. And then we get Venom, who is staying as a combat hero. So this is quite nice. He doesn't go back to being a villain. He's staying a combat hero. And as you can see from his skills, they deal physical damage. So a lot of people were thinking that he was going to deal cold damage. I was thinking he was going to deal cold damage. Apparently he's not. So yeah, apparently even though it's a winter uniform, it's called literally Snow Symbiote. He's not dealing elemental damage. He's dealing physical damage. So that's an interesting choice. Yeah, I think some people are going to be happy, some people are going to be disappointed, but rage and competition are still going to be best for Venom. Ostensibly, he won't have any possibility of using a judgment. Now, one interesting thing that they are doing here for Venom is they're changing the way that his tier 3 works a little bit. So they never listed it on his uniform effect, but basically he still has the 15% attack, sure. I think they're removing the crit damage. He had 35% crit damage on his old uniform, so he is losing a stat. But now, instead of just upgrading, when you collect the tier 4 blobs, when they shoot out and you collect them and it charges your tier 3, it's going to charge it beyond 100%, up to 50%. So there's basically, you'll be able to use more tier 3 skills with Venom, and you won't have to worry about charging it as efficiently as possible. They're basically making Venom easier to play, and they're making it more synergistic in the sense that you just want to pop off the tier 4 as aggressively as possible and collect those orbs, because you'll be able to charge the tier 3 beyond 100%, so you don't have to worry about it. So this is a really big change for Venom. It's kind of hidden here at the beginning, and it doesn't seem like much. It just seems like a bunch of yapping, but it's actually really good, and it should make Venom quite a bit more fun to play. He's already fun to play because you get to pop off his tier 3 a lot, and I think it's going to be even more fun to play now because you're going to be popping off his tier 3 even more frequently, believe it or not. Yeah, he maintains the heal under 99%, which is pretty cool, so he does have that. And then as far as his passives go, he still has the 45% ignore dodge, the skill damage bonus damage at 5245, and then the 30% damage reduction. So nothing has changed on his tier 2 passive. His 4-star passive Enigma is still 15% chain hit, 30% guaranteed crit, and then the 40% all defense. So this is all exactly the same. Yeah. As far as his skills go, on his old kit, he had He had Snare, Fracture, and Incapacitation on his first skill. So we're looking for the Snare and the Fracture to go somewhere else, because otherwise he won't be as useful for ABL, right? Because those are 2 ABL abilities. So we lose the Snare and the Fracture here on 1. We do see the Snare show up again on 3, and we do see the Fracture show up again on 4. So that is good to see. He also has Silence, which is an ABX ability. He also has Paralysis, which is another ABX ability. And then he gains Chill. But that still means that he's missing Burn, because he used to have Burn, I believe, on his 4th skill. So he does lose the Burn completely. That makes him a little bit worse for ABX. And then he does not gain Shock, which was the other ability, the ABL ability that he was missing, which was Shock. So before, Venom had all 3 ABX abilities and 2 ABL abilities. Now he has the same number of ABL abilities, but he actually lost an ABX ability in Burn. So that's kind of annoying, and because they build him as like a PvE guy, but then they took away one of his ABX abilities. I don't really understand why they would do that, but it is what it is. Yeah, it is what it is, as we often say on this channel. It is what it is. Yeah, he keeps the barrier on his 2nd skill, which is cool. The 8-hit barrier. He's got the frenzy buff on his 3rd skill, which is the same. And then he's got thankfully, he maintains the V-pad on his 4th skill, which is nice, with the damage proc and the immunity. And then the 5th skill gives him the invincibility and the attack buff. So all of the stats for all of the skills for Venom are the same. The V-pad is the same. The passives are the same. Really the only change, although it is a pretty big change for Venom, the only change is how his ultimate gauge, how his tier 3 gauge is charged by his tier 4. But that is a big improvement. I don't want to undersell how big of an improvement that is. It's actually quite a big improvement, but at the same time, it is the only change. So we'll have to see from his skills if he has a lot more hits. I believe he has a lot more hits on his combo now, and he's a lot more, maybe a lot more proc friendly, and I believe also a lot more chain hit damage friendly. So I do think this should be a huge buff for Venom. It just doesn't show in the patch notes, okay? And then we get Jeff's tier 3 and his tier 4. His tier 3 looks like this, where he gets really big and he chomps you like his ult in Rivals. He has penetration on that with invincibility and all that stuff that's you kind of expect from a tier 3 ability. His tier 4 basically just increases damage dealt to enemies with 50% HP or higher and 50% HP or lower. These are getting kind of stupid, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to complain too much about this because it is what it is, but it's basically just, you know, it's just a 50% increase basic damage dealt. The first line is just increase basic damage dealt by 50% to enemies. And then there's a second line that says, you know, increase basic damage dealt by an extra 30% to enemies who are below 50% HP. All this other stuff is just kind of needlessly complicated, right? It's needlessly complicated. It's a little bit weird. Anyways, Kid Kaiju and Inferno get their awakening skills where it's a bunch of fire. That's cool. We'll talk more about Kid Kaiju. He's actually relevant, which is crazy. And then we have the big elephant in the room here that a lot of people are excited about, but some people are upset about. This is the additional CTP slot. So custom gear multi-slot. So all characters now are going to have the ability to unlock a second CTP slot, much in the same way that you can unlock multiple ISO 8 slots for a character. However, instead of costing 100 crystals for the ISO 8 sets, because they're not that impactful, it's going to be 1,000 crystals per character per CTP slot. Now, that is a lot of crystals. However, I would argue, and I would just advise you guys, the majority of characters don't need 2 CTP slots. It's not a situation where, oh, eventually I'm going to want every single character to have 2 CTP slots. There's genuinely no good reason for like 90% of the characters to have a second CTP slot. Like, what am I going to do with a second CTP slot on Misty Knight or Ghost Panther or Yondu? There's just no reason. No, I mean, there's a reason if you personally really like the character, right? Let's say you personally really like White Fox and you want to use her in PvE content, but you recognize that she's best as a support character. So you're like, okay, I'm going to pay the 1,000 crystals to unlock the second set, and the first set's going to be whatever, a CTP of Insight or a CTP of Liberation for the regular content that we, associate with White Fox. And then the second one is going to be a CTP of Rage, because I love White Fox and I'm going to use her in PvE content even if she's terrible. Sure, that can be the case for a few characters that you're really fond of, but 200 characters? No. So I've already seen people throwing it around like, oh my god, with 200 characters, it's like 200,000 crystals. Bro, no one's going to do that. Genuinely, this is not a serious topic. Like, no one's going to do that. It doesn't make any sense. Me personally, I don't see the value in my roster beyond like 5 characters. And I'll tell you the characters right now. I think this second CTP slot is very useful for Null. It's very useful for Mephisto. It's very useful for, on this screen right now, Ghost Rider. I think it can be useful depending on what content you do for Wolverine. And again, I think it can be useful depending on what content you do for someone like Deadpool. But beyond that, like, what am I going to do with the second CTP slot for Sentry? I'm not going to use Sentry for PvE, so it doesn't really matter. And then it kind of just goes on from there. However, this is a cool thing. In the past, I will be honest, I did think, and I did speculate that when they give us the second CTP slot, that it was like the end of the game. That the game was like fast approaching its, its goodbye phase. Because I just never thought they would do this, right? I thought that they would want to keep milking players for the unequipped costs. But then, a year and a half ago, they introduced the hot deal where you could pay like $7 to get a 24-hour unequipped free for CTPs. And so the game didn't end after that. So I don't think the game is going to end after this, but I do think some people are going to remember me saying that and going to want like an update on this. So I don't think this means the end of the game. I just think it means that they're going in a different direction. And I think they probably have the marketing team to thank for this, because I think as the game has gotten older, it's not that the game has gotten so much better necessarily, but they've gotten a lot better at monetizing the game. And I think the game is making more money with the same amount of effort. And so they're able to concede on certain points like this, where normally we would see this as like a desperation move, or like, oh no, they really need money. Like this is the final cash out. I don't think that's the case anymore, because again, I think they've monetized the game better in the past 3 or 4 years. And I think that the game is still making money. And so they're just like, yeah, you know what? We don't need to hold this as like a, Uno reverse card at the end of the game. That we don't need to hold this as like our ace in the hole. We can just give them this now because we still have more ways to make money down the road. Yeah, so that's basically it. As far as the CTP slots go, they're not going to stack, so you're not going to get both buffs simultaneously. And of course, you have to choose like your card sets and your ISO 8 sets. You have to choose which CTP applies to which content. It's pretty straightforward. And yeah, it's not going to allow any sort of like game-breaking bugs or game-breaking effects and things like that. Additionally, they're going to allow you to filter by pressing the button multiple times to see the first or second CTP slot for characters, if you do in fact have that available. And then you can also check on your details page the differences between Custom Gear Slot 1 and Custom Gear Slot 2. Honestly, now would have been a good time to release a new CTP, but they didn't do that. Anyways, we got the new artifacts. I shouldn't give them any ideas. Jeff's artifact is a support artifact, which gives all hero allies 20% attack and 20% max HP. So that's why I was saying I think Jeff might be the best cleanse for heroes and better than Wasp and stuff like that with all these buffs. Then Kid Kaiju is getting also a support artifact for Inhuman allies, increasing their damage to heroes and villains by 15%. So Kid Kaiju is actually a viable support for Inhumans now. Yeah, crazy. Freaking Kid Kaiju. And then Inferno just gets increased flame damage. We got the new Future Pass. We got the new icons, which include a Jeff one that everyone's going to want. We got the Luna Snow icon. We got the Moon Knight icon. Basically an icon for all the characters who are not available yet, plus Jeff. We get the 11-year anniversary icon, and then we just get a generic Marvel Future Fight icon, which looks kind of cool. Anyways, we have the new update hot deals. They're keeping the custom gear and equip pack, which I find interesting. And then we have the other improvements and changes. So this one is actually very nice at first glance, but it could be very problematic. So they're allowing you to set the same striker for multiple heroes. Whereas before, as soon as you set a striker for a hero that's already set, it'll take it off of the previous characters. That doesn't matter anymore. You can have duplicate heroes striking for the same character. However, this is going to have a problem in PvP. So I hope this doesn't work in PvP, or I hope they've, I don't know, thought about this, because you're just going to set Wolverine for every character for PvP. And then if you're playing in Alliance Conquest, you could ostensibly have Wolverine, right, on each team. And then the other 2 characters on each team also have Wolverine set as their tier 4 striker. And you could see 6 Wolverines on the screen at the same time. The 2 regular Wolverines and then the 4 strikers. This is going to be absolute mayhem. It might be funny, it might be broken, I don't know, but it's very, very handy for PvE. It does seem a little bit busted OP for PvP, and for PvP, it does, if this works for PvP the way that I think it works, which is what I just explained with the 6 Wolverines, then it's going to make it a lot more important for players to build certain tier 4 strikers, because now you can extract a lot more value from them. So yeah, keep that in mind, guys. This is going to fly under the radar as kind of like a pointless quality of life thing, but this is actually huge and has some pretty serious implications for PvP. So yeah, we should keep a close eye on this. There's also going to be a sort of a clue giving you the amount of Pierce that you ought to have for certain World Boss Legends, which is a nice sort of quality of life for new players. They are finally fixing the energy recharge for VIP players, so you can rest assured that you're getting the full value now from your VIP. And then they're also increasing the rewards from Alliance Conquest. So this one's pretty interesting because I actually played Alliance Conquest for the first time the other day. I didn't play very much. I played like three or four. I did like 3 or 4 fights. And I got 100 life seed, or not life seed, 100 Soul of the Faltine from the box. So what they're doing, these are the normal leagues and these are the challenge leagues, but they're basically increasing all of the rewards that will be available by 50%, 50 to 60% almost. And then they're getting rid of a bunch of lesser rewards. So in the normal league, they're getting rid of the rank 1 black antimatter and Nornstones, Chaos Nornstones. They're getting rid of the life seed at the higher levels and the heroic emblem data. So they're basically narrowing the rewards you can get, and then they're adding elite gear, which we know is very, very valuable. And then for the Challenger League, they're basically doing the same thing. They're getting rid of life seed and the tier 3 materials and the legendary emblem data, and then they're increasing stuff with elite gear and the percentages as well. So the mythic one in particular I want to focus on. I know this is the hardest one to get because you have to do 30 attacks, but if we take a look at this in game here, we can see that for Challenger League you have the mythic reward. And remember, well, I guess it doesn't show me the amounts, but the amount of mythic data you can get is going to be increased by 50%. And you still have the, premium rewards here, and they're just going to be getting rid of the life seed and the legendary data. So if you look at this now, the worst hits you can get from the mythic chest are basically what? An Odin's Blessing, and I guess the mega tier 2 ticket. Think about that. For Conquest, the worst reward you can get now is probably going to be an Odin's Blessing. That's not bad. It is still a lot of work. I think 30 attacks for 1 Odin's Blessing is still, in my opinion, too much work, and I don't think I'm going to be doing it. But it's a lot better than before, and I'll be curious to see the percentages, like the amounts that you get for some of these drops, because they're being increased by 50%, right? I think for my normal chest, just for context, this is what I got. I got the contribution chest normal, and I got 100 Soul of the Faltine. So now with these changes that are going to apply after the update, it would be 150. That's not bad. That's like a day's worth. In this case, it was like for nothing, right? I did like 2 attacks, and I get a day's worth of Soul of the Faltine. So for very little contribution, you can still get some pretty decent rewards. That's what I think is pretty nice, right? Again, I think ultimately Conquest still takes too long in my opinion, and I think what they should do is maybe reduce the number of attacks that you need. I think it should maybe go like 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So just like lop off 30 and rebalance it from there. But I don't know. It's better than nothing. And then they're changing the potential realization, which we already talked about, where it's always going to reach 100% when you realize a character's potential. And they're going to be changing all of the potential realization tickets into tier 4 materials. They're also increasing the drop rate for certain Shield Archive collection items. So this is really good for people farming the Shield Archive. They've also done some guide improvements for new players, which is good. They added a skip menu for dimension chest category stuff. They've added a new game guide for emblem data. They've added a max option for the settings menu. So if you want to take your graphics to the max graphics and max frame rate, you can now do that. Very exciting. They updated Venom's tier 4 striker skill, again, to coincide with the change on his uniform. And then they've added a new system for brand new accounts. So if you're downloading the game for the very first time in Marvel Future Fight, you get some extra rewards. You get some energy, some gold, some crystals. It's just for very, very new players. And then this one is kind of hidden, but they're adding an exchange ticket to the custom gear screen. And there's going to be 3 new items: normal, mighty, and brilliant CTP selection exchange tickets that are going to be added. Now, my guess is twofold. One, I think they're still going to have the CTP exchange events, but I think they're going to improve them by, instead of making the event localized in time to when it runs, meaning that if you show up a week after the event, you get no CTP exchange. Instead, or if, let's say, the exchange happens and you don't have a CTP to exchange at the time. Instead, the crafting event is going to allow you to craft a ticket that you can then save for a later date, because they probably got feedback from players that were excited to participate in the CTP exchange event, but then didn't have, let's say, a brilliant CTP at the time to exchange. And so they were kind of bummed out, and they said, oh, well, the event's not really for me because I have no brilliant CTP to exchange. They're going to change it into a ticket. I think that's really, really good. Additionally, it allows them to sell these exchange tickets, which I think is great for players who have CTPs that they want to exchange into other types. And it's also great for marketing. Again, I think the game is much better marketed now. And I think this is kind of an underrated change that's going to fly under the radar, but that is going to be really, really good in the future when it pops up. And then there are a bunch of game error fixes, which are not really worth reading. But yeah, no new content again. Definitely hurts the game. Definitely hurts player retention and player kind of focus. I think the devs are probably planning some big content changes and upgrades. We know they said in the dev note from December that this year there's gonna be a new GBR, a new world boss, and an epic quest. So there's still a lot of content to go in the rest of the year. I do think that they're planning to drop it, pretty soon, if I had to guess. And I think they're using the anniversary as a bit of a stall to get more time, particularly because the anniversary is full of events that are going to keep people occupied anyways. It's a bit of a risky gamble. I will say it is a bit of a risky gamble, but at the same time, if I needed more time to develop as a developer, I would do something like this, right? I would certainly use the anniversary as a bit of a stall, and I think they were smart to also make it a collab update, which will be hype. And it'll, I think the goal is to bring in players from Rivals, and they're not going to see the game as lacking update or missing update and content, because they're going to have a bunch of content to play because they've never played the game before, right? So it does feel a little bit like a new player or like a pandering update that doesn't really do too much for veterans, besides maybe the CTP exchange ticket and a couple of other things, the striker change. But I think it'll be pretty good. I think the update will still be pretty good, and then I think Luna will be pretty huge in 2 weeks, along with Moon Knight. I think there will be enough meta shifts, meta changes, and again, I do like. There's no way. Let's say, for example, right? Let's say there's no new content in 2 weeks. There's no way that they're going to go another full update without any content. So I think at this point, because we're already almost halfway into the year, the May or June update or whatever it is has to have one of those 3 things. Has to be either the epic quest, the new world boss, or the GBR, because they can't backload that much content, right? There's just no way to do all of that. So I'm not too worried, but I can understand why people are upset, and you can see from the end of the patch notes where they have the little icons that you can react that people are mostly upset. I'm not happy necessarily, but I can just sort of see both sides. But yeah, I'll hold my final opinion for the actual update itself. I don't want to do the same thing I did last update, which is like, oh, it's going to be so terrible, and then I read the patch notes and see the reaction in game and it's so good, and then I just have to change my tune. So I'm going to try to be a little bit more even keeled about this one, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyways, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys tonight on the live stream. Be there or be square, as the cool kids say. Thanks for watching. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you later on. Take care.